Good morning, Logan. Back for another installment of Algebra 1. Today the focus is going to be solving quadratics by completing the square. So last section we talked about what it means to complete the square, and this section we're going to talk about how we solve them by actually completing the square. So now we're dealing with equations. That means you're going to have an equal sign. That's a little bit different from last time. So the first thing I want us to look at is we are solving things that kind of look like this guy right here. So they're going to kind of look like that. Now to do it, you have 4 steps. Step number 1 is kind of a weird one. You got to get that c and you got to get it to the other side of the equation by either adding or subtracting. So I want it to be in this format here, x squared plus bx. So your quadratic term and your linear term is equal to some number. Okay, so we're going to get it equal to some number. Then you're going to complete the square. We'll review that again. And then after completing the square, you're going to add that square to both sides of the equation. And then you are going to factor and solve the equation by isolating the square component. Let's jump right into it with question A. And the first thing is you'll notice that it's not the square and the linear. It's not the quadratic and the linear. It's got this extra constant term here. So we're going to get rid of this number right here by adding it to both sides of the equation. So I'm going to add the 3 to both sides. The result is going to be x to the power of 2 plus 8x is equal to 20. So now I have this new equation that kind of looks like this guy over here. All right, so it looks like that. I want to complete the square. So I now need to take b and cut it in half. So I'm going to write down the work over here so we have what b is, and we cut it in half. So we're going to take b and we're going to cut it. That's not b, that's an x, that's bad. So we're going to take b, which happens to be 8 in this problem, and we're going to cut it in half. So we're going to go 8 divided by 2, which gives us 4. The next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to multiply that number by itself. So we're going to take the 8 over 2 and we're going to square it. In other words, we're squaring b divided by 2, which gives us 16. That's the perfect square. So now that we've completed the square, we're going to add the square to both sides of the equation. So we're going to take this 16 and we're going to add it to both the left side and the right side of the equation. This is a little bit different from the first section we did, section 9.3a, because we only had to worry about the trinomial. Now we have to worry about the entire equation because there is an equal sign. Once we do that, we're now going to solve by factoring. So the way we factor is we set up our 2 parentheses. So I'm going to go parentheses and parentheses is equal to 20 and 16 is 36. So I got 36 on that side. Now I have to think of what multiplies to give me x to the power of 2. That's pretty straightforward. Just x times x gives us x to the power of 2. And then now we need to think of what multiplies to the 16, but also can add to the 8. Well, since we're completing the square, it's going to be the square root of 16, which is just 4. Now to get positive 8, they both need to be positive. Now to finish off with step 4, what we want to do is we want to combine the x plus 4s as an individual binomial. X plus 4 to the power of 2 is equal to 36. And then from here, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to isolate the square component, which is already isolated. So now we just need to square root both sides. So we're going to square root the left side, and we're going to square root the right side. Remembering that when you square root a perfect square, they cancel out. And we get x plus 4 is equal to 6. But we have to remember we need both versions of the square root of 36. Which means x plus 4 not only equals 6, but also equals negative 6. We we subtract the 4 from both sides of the problem, and we get x is equal to 2. But there is an additional answer, so we have to subtract the 4 over here, because there's a secondary equation, and we get x equals negative 10. And there's our answer for question A. All right, let's try the same thing for problem B. Step 1, we want to make sure it looks like this. All right, we want to make sure it looks like this thing right here. And we're in luck because it looks exactly like that. Notice it was the quadratic, the linear, and then the constant, the number without a variable, is already on the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite it with a little bit of space. X to the power of 2 minus 6x is equal to 27. I almost wrote a 9 right there. Is equal to 27. So we want to take our b, which is negative 6, and we want to cut it in half, and that's going to give us negative 3. Now we're going to take the negative 3 and we're going to square it, and that gives us 9. And that's what we want to add to both sides of our problem. So we're going to add a 9 to the right side, and we're going to add a 9, we're going to add a 9 to the left side, and then we're going to add it to the right side so that it balances out. Now we can factor this thing right here. We can think of 2 things that multiply to give us x to the power of 2, which is x times x, and then two things that multiply to 9 but can add up to negative 6. That would be negative 3 and negative 3 is equal to 27 plus 9 is 36. All right, now the best way to solve this thing is to write it as a square. So we're going to write x minus 3 to the power of 2 is equal to 36. Now we're going to solve it by square rooting both sides of the problem. Square rooting the left side and square rooting the right side. Remembering that when you square root a perfect square, it cancels out. But when you square root 36, you have to write down both versions of the square root, which is 6, and we have a secondary equation, negative 6. And then we solve this one by adding 3 to both sides, and we get x is equal to 9. And we add 3 to both sides, and we get x is equal to negative 3. Moving on to our last example, example C. First thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure it looks like, that's right, this guy right up here. So we're going to subtract that 3. We want to get rid of that constant term, and we get x to the power of 2 plus 12x is equal to negative 2. Now we need to complete the square. Completing the square means we're going to take the b and cut it in half. So we take the 12 and cut it in half, that gives us 6. We now want to take that 6 and we want to multiply it by itself. We want to square it, and that's 36. This is how much we need to add to both sides of the equation. So we're going to add 36 onto the left side, completing the square, and we're going to add 36 onto the right side. Add the square to both sides of the equation. Now we're going to factor this. We're going to get two parentheses. The first parentheses is going to be x, and the second parentheses is going to have an x. That gives us the x to the power of 2. 36 to give us 12 is going to be 6 times 6 and 6 plus 6. So I'm going to write a 6 in there, but I'm going to write positive 6 because that's how we're going to get that positive 12 is equal to 34. All right, this gives us our new equation. X plus 6 to the power of 2 is equal to 34. We're going to square root both sides of the problem. So we square root the left side and we square root the right side. Now when we square root the left side, that's easy. We just get x plus 6. The right side is where it gets goofy. There is no perfect square, so we're just going to write down, that's right, the square root of 34. But remember, there are two possible answers here. You also have the square root of 34, and you have the secondary equation, which is the negative square root of 34. We solve this one over here by subtracting 6 from both sides, which I actually can't do. And anything I can't do, I just write it out. Negative 6 plus root 34. X is by itself. Over here, same exact thing. X equals, since I can't actually subtract a square root and a a square root and a whole number, I'm just going to write negative 6 minus the square root of 34. And we now have our two answers. So if I wanted to go back and just kind of box my answers, the answer to question C is both of those guys right there. The answer to question B, both those, 9 and negative 3. And my answers to question A, is 2 and negative 10. All right. Hope this helps out. Hope to talk to you guys soon. Bye.